Can you hear me? Yeah. I think we should start. We're all seated. We're all expectantly looking in this direction. Welcome all. Really nice to see so many of you. A good turnout as usual, which is really reassuring. I might as well start with especially thanking any councillors that are here today. I know of at least one councillor, Charles Booth, who's here. Maybe you put your hand up. Thanks very much. That's the Greens, Greens spokesman, Charles Booth, and David Key. That's David Key, the council's cycling champion. Yeah. Any other councillors here who'd like to make themselves known? Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you very much. It's always good to see that we have support at that level. We've been busy since our last public meeting. We are celebrating our 40th year, in case you don't know yet. And for that, we've put together an exhibit celebrating what we've been doing for these 40 years, which is on display in the room next door. If you haven't managed to see it, it will be up for a few more minutes at the end of this meeting, till 10 o'clock, so go and have a look. The exhibit was funded very generously with help from Sustrans, so thank you very much, Daisy, and also from the Edinburgh Bicycle Co-op. So again, very grateful. Professionally designed 6 posters with lots of highlights of what we've been up to in the last 40 years, which is actually very interesting. How it changes from black and white pictures to coloured. And our logo, which has changed as well, etc. Quite interesting to see the perspective changes over these years. Yeah. So apart from that, we've also put together 3 very short videos just to celebrate what we've been doing and to give other people an idea of what we actually do now as well. I won't show you all 3, but we thought we would highlight just the one of them. It only takes 2.5 minutes, so very quickly.
Spokes is looking great for 40. I hope I look as good when I'm 40. So I think they've got a long track record of achievement over those 40 years. I hope in the next 40 years there's far more members of Spokes because there's far more members of the public cycling. And I hope genuinely that Edinburgh looks a far different city in terms of the cycling infrastructure in the next 40 years, and the progress that we've made in the last 40 years isn't a reflection of the rate of change that we can achieve going forward in the next 4 decades.
I think they just need to give themselves a well-deserved pat on the back. I mean, they have, over the long term, constructively campaigned, as I've said, across all the political groups on the council, and I think it's paid huge dividends. We've got the highest number of people cycling to work of any of the big conurbations in Scotland, and second only to London in the rest of the UK, and that's in great part due to the good work that Spokes have undertaken.
Oh, well, there's always more that can be done, absolutely. I don't really think we want much of a pat on the back because, as I said, we tend to enjoy what we're doing. We're not told that we have to do this, we're doing it basically because we get rewards out of it. We feel we're doing something worthwhile, I guess, for the future of the planet, of our children.
I genuinely don't think I can thank Spokes enough. Their input, their support has been phenomenal. Cycling in this city wouldn't have come on as it has done. We wouldn't have 10% of Edinburgh's transport budget being spent on cycling if it wasn't for Spokes. I would like to give them all a huge hug, many kisses, huge best wishes, very happy 40th birthday, Spokes. I will be celebrating, very well with you.
lots of credit due to the two students from Edinburgh University Film, as some course on film studies that helped us make that little video. We also have a reception at the City Chambers coming up. We've tried to get lists of people invited, of people intended. We intend to invite people who have been very active in Spokes. If you feel like you have been very active and you weren't invited, then please, we apologize, and please stay behind and let us know that you haven't been invited, because you get these things, we get these things wrong. Yeah? So the reception is at the City Chambers on Tuesday, and we look forward to that as well. Today, we've come together to look at the city plans, the plans that we have for cycling from the new councils that are now in place. Yeah? Important, obviously, because we can comment on them and we know what they are. We have prompted them to think about their plans. That's an important one. And obviously, we can remind them if some plans are there. We also get a context in which these plans are made, so we can understand better what we might more effectively campaign for. All really important points. But the other important point was to bring these people together so they can maybe learn from each other and collaborate. And we don't really want cycle facilities that stop round about the Edinburgh bypass. And joined up thinking and trying to foster collaboration and facilitate people talking to each other. So that's the theme of today. We've got the people that are best positioned to talk about these things, as we usually try for. So we have somebody from West Lothian Council, Councillor Russell Imrie, Cabinet Member and former SEStran Chair. Yeah? Mid Lothian, sorry. Yeah. We have Jim Stewart from West Lothian, Development and Transportation Manager. Yeah. We have an apology from the East Lothian person, Norman Hampshire, Councillor Norman Hampshire, who couldn't appear today. We're hoping we get his presentation on our website. We'll see. And we have Leslie McInnes, the Transport and Environment Committee convener, Edinburgh City Council. So without further ado, I will let them introduce themselves a little bit more. We're going to have 10 minutes, or roughly 10 minutes, because we are one speaker short. We can be a little bit more generous about our 10 minutes. We'll have question and answer afterwards. And after that, I will make a couple more announcements and then pass over to Daisy from Sustrans to chair the question and answer session. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed, and can I say thank you to Spokes for inviting me along. Don't worry, I have for many, many years got your bulletin, and I've read it from cover to cover. Normally it's about what's happening in Edinburgh, not maybe particularly what's going on in Midlothian. So it gives me an opportunity, I suppose, tonight, just to say a few things about the challenges in Midlothian, and secondly, what we have been able to do over the last number of years. My name is Russell Imrie. I've been a councillor since the inception of Midlothian Council in 1995. I was formerly a councillor in Edinburgh City Council, the District Council, before that, and indeed I chaired the SEStran Regional Transport Partnership for 10 years before I got kicked out under the legal framework, and that is that you're not allowed to do 10 years as part of the Act of Parliament. So that's a little bit of the background. Now, I just want to then start off by looking at the Midlothian challenges. And just to let people know, Midlothian's circa 80,000 of a population, very small, rural, well, at the moment, about another 20,000 houses to come our way, so will not be so small thereafter that, in terms of percentage add-ons, and a good opportunity, may I hasten to add, a good opportunity to put cycling and walking at the front of these planning applications. And it's something within the supplementary planning guidelines that we will be having, so developers will know when they go into design format that they will have the opportunity to come up with something that is cycling and walking friendly. In other words, people friendly. And place will be very much on that in that particular addenda. Now, the problem that we have in Midlothian is that the topography of the very fact that Midlothian is really split in two. We have the east side of Midlothian and the west side of Midlothian, and the Esk Valley that sits right in the centre. So very challenging for cycling, never mind for getting around Midlothian. But nevertheless, it's something that we have to address, we have to get on with, and we have to try and resolve, because at the end of the day, it's all about safe cycling. We don't just want to, get a tick in the box saying we support cycling and not make people that go out there, maybe for the first time, feel threatened by the very nature of going out there on a bike. So that is very much up the top of our agenda. Another problem we face, of course, is that of the Edinburgh city bypass. An absolute nightmare for anybody probably, but worse for cyclists. And there is nothing at that time happening. Now, there may be good news round the corner, and you may pull long faces, but as part of the city deal, the city region deal, there is going to be a relief road built from the Midlothian Science Zone down to the bypass, and the existing 701 is going to be made into a public transport corridor. So there's one for Spokes. If you want to lobby, and I put this out to you right now, lobby to get your input into the design of what that public transport corridor will do. I invite you to do that, and it's my role and responsibility, not just on the transport side, but as Chair of Planning as well, to take these kind of things on board when we design it. Now, I'm not just saying what you want is what you'll get. It's got to be all looked at, but at least it's something where a debate can start, because we don't, at this moment in time, actually have a finished idea of what we're going to do. We've said it's going to be a public transport corridor. Then the challenges come that way. So, for example, if there are things that you feel that you want included in that corridor, please come and talk to us. And that's an open invitation. We'll have officers there that will be there to listen as well. They can take it away and factor that into the design model. The other problem for us, of course, is road space and land ownership. And we know that the private owners of the land are not exactly bending over backwards to help alleviate some of the problems that we have in cycling. I'm a great believer, and I've actually been away with Sustrans Scotland many years ago over to some of the European countries, and you see how they have addressed cycling and walking and vehicle movement, and it's all done by separation. And I just totally believe that people will feel safer if you actually had a separated structure along for both walking, cycling and indeed vehicle movement. And it's something that hopefully we can factor in with new developments coming in. The difficulty we have, like any authority, is retrofitting anything, and it's sometimes more difficult to try and retrofit along the way. We do try what we can do within the ownership of what the council has, but the difficulty we have is the landowners aren't exactly bending over backwards to help us in that way, in that manner. Now, of course, what comes along with that is the financial challenge, and I'm not going to beat about the bush and say everything's rosy within local authorities. If I was to say to you tonight, Midlothian is broke, you would look at me as if there was something wrong. And I'll say to you, we've got to find, in comparison to Edinburgh's numbers of 21 million, we've got to find £14 million this year or next year in savings. Now, if a £180 million budget, with £100 million of that more or less ring-fenced for education and social care, there ain't a lot left in the kitty. So, the government warning in the sense is that, we will do our level best to try and get things done. And it's with that we look at the kind of cycle ownership in Midlothian. Very high proportion of households actually in Midlothian have ownership of cycles. It's actually quite astounding how many people actually do have cycles in Midlothian. They might not be able to get around in them, but they actually have them in the garages. No, that's an aside. I don't mean that. Of course they get around in them. And that's something I wanted to just turn to. We do have targets for cycling in Midlothian, and we're looking at 10% of all the trips that are made. We should hit that by 2020. Now, we don't know if that will happen. We've got a small percentage of trips at this by bike at this moment in time, which by that I mean by main mode of transport. And obviously the challenge is to get more and more people to cycle. From that aspect, actually, we've been very, very successful in our schools programme. We have transport officers that go out there. They do the cycling education. We've had people from various groups and various organisations involved in the cycling fraternity. They go out there as well, and they really have got young children to actually get out of mum and dad's car, taking them to the classroom, and in actual fact, they're now cycling or indeed walking or going by scooter. And, well, you have to support anything that means they're not using a private vehicle. So we've had a great success in that. We're also very aware that our council staff have got to get training, particularly those that are driving HGV vehicles. We've heard a lot in the press about situations that have happened with cyclists and heavy goods vehicles. All of our HGV and PSV drivers are trained to be aware of cyclists, and as we churn out the vehicles, we will actually have them fitted with radar to detect cyclists in the future. It ain't going to happen overnight. It's one of those things that as your vehicles are churning out and you're renewing your vehicles, there's an opportunity to do that, and that's something that we're doing. We also have 2 pool bikes, believe it or not, and an electric cargo bike for staff to use in actually carrying out some of the functions within the work environment. In other words, if they're going out on short distances, they don't need to be using vehicles. They can actually use either the 2 bikes that we have and the electric cargo bike that we have as well. We have recently installed cycle lockers and cover cycle parking for staff. We also have the showers that are available for staff as well. So we are doing a small bit within the council to try and educate staff that there is an alternative to actually getting to your work place, and the facilities are there. So you take away the excuses and you cross your fingers and hope that the staff will actually adhere to what we're trying to do. As far as the new rail line that was installed, the Borders rail line, we've done a lot of work in there with all the stations so that there's signposting, etc., so that folks are coming to stations. They know that they know what's available to them by way of routes or how they can go about getting around the county. We're also very aware that people tend to drive to the station, park up there and then use the train. And we've done an education programme in that by targeting a lot of the people that use their private vehicles to get to the station by targeting them to say, you know, there is an alternative. You can be there. It's safe to go by bike, and it's safe to leave your bike there at the station during the day. And we've been reasonably successful in that, and obviously you've got to keep at it. We're also still looking at future connections for the cycle network. We've got quite a lot of the network in Midlothian. There's a lot more to be done, and hopefully within the next financial year we're going to include a core path network at from the Goutley Ross roundabout to Roslin, which will encourage staff using the Midlothian Science Zone to cycle to work. And we do have a lot of staff we've got 5 actual employers that are signed up to that. Sorry, I'm just getting that horrible pointed finger at me. Can I just say that, in fact, in the Midlothian Tourist Forum side of things, we've encouraged the Tourist Forum to produce pamphlets as well about how people can get around Midlothian by bike. And I think it's terribly important that we continue to do that. There's a lot going on in Midlothian, maybe not as much as a lot of you would think, and I take that one on the chin, but with limited budgets we try and do what we can. I thank you for listening to me. I just gave you a quick synopsis of what we are doing in Midlothian, and quite happy to have a question and answer session, Chair, and see how things go. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks very much. We have Jim Stewart, West Lothian. Thank you very much.
And presumably this technology will move the slides as well. Yeah, that's good. Hi everybody, I'm Jim Stewart, West Lothian Council. I'm the Development Management and Transportation Planning Manager. I've worked in local authority for a number of years now with various different roles. One of my roles in the team at the moment is I deal with development type transportation issues, including delivery of cycle initiatives with that, and also had an officer until the beginning of the year who dealt with a lot of the active travel and cycle issues. So Deborah Payton, who was here a few years ago, 3 years ago I think it was involved in that, and she came and gave a presentation to you to tell you how we were moving forward with various schemes and things within our community links work with Sustrans. So I'm briefly just going to cover some of that detail and that information. As an officer, I'm kind of going to tell you where I think we are and what's happening and how things might go forward. There was a range of projects identified previously, and in the last 5 years we've been working quite hard to deliver those, but it's not been possible to deliver them all. Some of the issues that Councillor Imrie was mentioning there about land ownership and various things like that have made it more difficult to deliver things. So I'm bound to get this wrong. That's the wrong one. Have I broken it? There we go. That's why I don't do slides. See, I'm okay now. That's it. Just a little bit of background for everyone. The sort of national context on cycling, active travel. We have the National Walking Strategy, the Cycling Action Plan for Scotland, and I'm sure most of you are aware that there's in the recent government initiative for doubling funding in 2018-19 towards active travel initiatives. So there is a national context there to deliver and support active travel, which obviously includes cycling. There's also been the creation of the Smarter Choices, Smarter Places funding, which has been put forward to allow us to promote and to get involved in more what you would call the softer measures, encouragement, mode change, behaviour change, that type of thing. So that's an area where there's been some additional funding made available. I'm sorry if I seem to be maybe telling you things you know an awful lot about, but clearly the key issues are linking communities so that commuting can take place, regeneration, with new development as well. There's the opportunity to deliver better cycle links. We have a considerable number of houses being proposed in West Lothian as well. We have the benefit of quite a number of them are large new settlements, so we can and have been working hard to deliver better infrastructure within those. One of the key issues is how we link those to the surrounding areas and surrounding towns and villages, because things are a bit more diverse and spread out in West Lothian. We've also got the national cycle route, access to railway stations. So these are the sort of themes that we would be trying to deliver as part of any of our work moving forward on cycling initiatives and active travel initiatives. When we put forward our sort of scheme of proposals for Sustrans in the last few years, it's been aimed at completing these missing links, getting links to the national cycle route, links between communities and leisure locations, town centres, to some extent trying to fill the gaps, because in West Lothian there is a need to get better integration between the communities for these types of journeys. We also have now published our active travel plan, which was in 2016. That highlights one of the key needs is how we would move forward and develop within the towns and villages within West Lothian to encourage more active travel of all types. That's the hard part next, in terms of how you move forward with that and deliver that. By way of background, in the 5-year period that from 2013 to 2017, there was about a £40 million roads and transportation budget, and that with that funding from Sustrans, we delivered about £3.6 million worth of schemes. That's very approximate. I've deliberately excluded footway improvements and footway maintenance and things like that, which potentially could argue are beneficial in the broader sense for active travel, but that's just specifically scheme-based, and that's specifically related to the Community Links programme. So what projects did we deliver? A link from Polbeth to West Cllr, which went past the secondary school and linked to nearby communities, both to the secondary school and to each other. We continued, over many years, we've developed a corridor along the A89 from Newbridge, and we're looking to work its way right through to Harthill at the west side of West Lothian. It's gradually been filling in the gaps. At the moment, it's now complete all the way to just past Bathgate. And the Bangor to Tesco section I'm referring to was one of the sort of missing links in that section. We are continuing to look to move that forward and develop it further to the west, using the Sustrans funding and probably cycling, walking safer streets funding. We improved links at Stanlaw, which gives a good commuting link to Livingston and Bathgate and provides facilities that were much needed. Ramps at the canals at Bathgate and Broxburn and Linlithgow to give better access to the canal path and to the local communities there. And some specifically very local links. For example, in Linlithgow there was a path that connects sort of the south side to the north part of the town. Very key link, and it was great we were able to deliver that last year. I've got some photographs just to sort of give you an idea. That's just an example of the corridor that we've been able to put in along the east-west route. It's similar into that standard all the way along, and that's how we would continue it. Bathgate to Livington, that's the Starwell link I was referring to. That goes along beside the A779, which is a pretty major link between Bathgate and the motorway junction at junction 3A. So that's fairly close to National Cycle Route 75 as well. So that missing link allowed connections between Livingston and Bathgate and also improved access to the National Cycle Route as well. just some examples of the ramps that were put in at the canal to allow access for the canal down. Again, that's near the school. It's near to the West Lothian Leisure, which is a sort of local leisure facility and things. So these, that's an example of sales path. I thought it would be quite nice just to let you see things that we've actually done, that have been built, have been delivered, using the funding that's been available. Again, Broxburn, just general improvements for access to people to get access either to leisure facilities or in some cases provide commuting. I mentioned Smarter Choices, Smarter Places earlier. That's a funding source from Scottish Government, which allows us to target what I'd say are sort of behaviour mode things. The sort of initiatives that we've done in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, which is when the initiative came in, is Love to Ride. There's been a challenge every September. Last year it was in West Lothian alone, and it's encouraging people to cycle to their work for the whole of the month of September. This year we worked in partnership with Clackmannanshire and Falkirk, and we had the Central Scotland one. Same idea, encouraging people to walk, cycle. There's a web page, apps for the phone, and it measures your cycle activity, and there's a wee bit of challenge in there and a wee bit of competition. So it's quite, it has been very successful and has been working. We continue to work with schools in the sort of similar way to Councillor Imrie mentioned. We do work with employers in terms of trying to encourage them to move forward with active travel. And we have created a number of active travel maps for some of the communities round about West Lothian, and are continuing and would be continuing to do so. So the what's next part. Some of these projects are at different stages. The A706, B7, that's the extension of the East-West corridor. That's a very tricky one because it goes across some pretty major roads. The 801 being one of the link between the motorways, the M8 and the M9. So there are some challenges there in terms of trying to deliver a scheme that works there. But we are continuing to move that forward. We have funding available to do some detailed design work and to take forward proposals for consultation. Whitburn to Armadale is a key link between Whitburn and Armadale to get access to Armadale railway station. And there's also shopping opportunities there, which, despite it being 2.5 miles away, there was a surprising level of walking to it, and there was no footpath at all. So we're addressing that and trying to deliver that. That's one where we're having issues with land acquisition. We have actually had to move to formal compulsory purchase to try and move that scheme forward, but I'm sure we will get there. Blackburn to Bathgate is about working on the environment in that area, trying to improve facilities for everybody, reduce accidents. It's just another key important link between the two communities. Bathgate railway station has been incredibly successful, but again the cycle links are quite difficult because despite a lot of effort at the time of the railway bill, we had real difficulties getting Network Rail to actually deliver connections from the network to the station, despite the fact that we're required to put basically a new National Cycle Route 75 in place. We still had difficulties, but they are working with us with this now. We're trying to get something moved forward with that. We have funding to design that. We've also just been through a consultation on a cycle-friendly roads project. A lot of good feedback from the community, generally supportive of it, some concerns. We are in a position to move forward with a pilot on that now, and at the moment we're likely to be looking towards the Bathgate Hills area where there's a lot of sort of leisure activity, and there's the Bee Craigs Country Park there. So there's a lot of things like that happening in the background. I'm kind of starting to go over the ground that has been raised earlier. The context for local authorities decreasing budgets increased demand for services. There's issues in having to decide budget priorities. The council in West Lothian are currently at the start or 3/4 of the way through a major consultation with the communities on whether they think the priorities are correct in West Lothian and what they think the key areas where the investment should be made. That's ongoing. For this current financial year, the budget was about 400 million. Over the next 5 years, West Lothian have to save 73 million, which is about 20% in total. So by the time we get to the 5 years, we'll be 20% lower than the 400 million we have in this current financial year. And it may be different from that. It depends on the priorities, because social work and education take a big part of the budget. And that's repeating what was said, but that's the kind of context within which we are having to operate as authorities and officers. It's important, the active travel funding is important to deliver the active travel agenda, and we need to continue to try and use that. One of the issues with that is match funding. I don't know how well you know how the process works, but the authority usually have to provide 50% of an infrastructure scheme, and the other half comes from Sustrans. Now, it's great that there's likely to be more money going to Sustrans and Paths for All for these types of schemes, but that's within a context of funding being reduced in local authorities. So there's more money going to active travel, but the local authorities are probably going to struggle to match it. But these are decisions that we're asking the community about so that we can make the right choices in terms of moving it forward. So just to conclude, there's clearly a key role for groups like yourselves and the communities to play. There's an argument for going to the funders and saying, look, can you reduce the match contribution? It might not go down too well, but it would enable the authorities to help deliver. And the budget, the consultation on the budgets is an opportunity for people who have a real interest in active travel and cycling to make that connections with the council and see how important these areas are in delivering the health agenda, sustainable transport, reduced emissions, and all the things that are important in trying to reduce our carbon footprint in terms of what's happening out there. Hopefully that gave you a flavour of how what we've managed to deliver, what we're still trying to do, and I'll obviously be happy to take any questions during the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to share these plans with us. Very informative. And last but not least, last but not least, yes. That's the one. Leslie McInnes, City of Edinburgh Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome. As was mentioned, I am Leslie McInnes. I'm the SNP Councillor for Liberton Gilmerton, and I'm the Transport and Environment Convener for the Coalition Administration here in Edinburgh. Earlier this evening, I had the very unnerving experience of sitting down at that table and going, I've left half my speech on the printer. So if you will forgive me, the first part of my speech might be a little less fluent than I had originally intended. I really wanted to talk to you about the fact that being new to this brief, I've understood that it's a very broad and a very wide one, but active travel is central to it. You may want to know that our coalition administration continues to be firmly committed to active travel in all its senses. We fully understand the benefits of walking and cycling to the city as a whole and to the residents as individuals. The programme for the coalition that we have for the next 5 years includes investment of £100 million on roads and pavements, and 10% of that going specifically to improving the cycling infrastructure. We're also committed to, for example, lowering our emissions and improving air quality. We're looking at reducing congestion and tackling other issues such as pavement parking, all of which I hope will make a difference to those who are cycling around in our city. We recognise very clearly that there's obviously a crossover between the work that goes on under my Committee of Transport and Environment and those that are contributing around issues of health. We're very conscious of that crossover. We're also very conscious of the fact that within the Scottish Government and indeed within our own administration there is a lot of talk now about prevention and about early intervention, and that's one role that active travel has in terms of improving the health of our city and allowing us to switch investment to positive, proactive activities such as building cycling infrastructure than it is on taking care of the effects of not building that cycling infrastructure. I'm very conscious, and I've been asked this a lot since I came into this post, about who I am and what I bring to the table. And often, particularly in a large city like this, the political lead does tend to set the tone. So I will hold my hand up right now and say I'm not a cyclist. But yeah, indeed, not only am I getting the full court press from some of my colleagues, but I'm also seriously looking at the possibility of purchasing an electric bike. And I suppose really what that does is illustrate very clearly to you part of my thinking attached to this. I probably represent quite a significant demographic here in Edinburgh. Back injury, bit overweight, live at the top of a hill. Not great in terms of a combination of actually getting myself out to be active, but I am very conscious that electric bikes are something that would allow more people to actually participate and hopefully get to the stage of fitness that would allow them to lose the electric bit and enjoy the benefits. I'm pretty sure every single person in this room already does. I might not be a cyclist, but I am firmly committed to the role of cycling in Edinburgh City. Apart from anything else, I have 2 grown-up children who are firmly committed to cycling, including a son who recently cycled from Edinburgh to Istanbul. Not, thankfully, as a commute, but he certainly came back raving about the positive benefits of it, both from the point of view of his physique, but also the mental health benefits of it as well. I mean, to be out there cycling and achieving such a thing was quite remarkable for me to watch and for him to do. To give you an indication of what we're trying to do within the administration, there are 2 people here tonight whom I would like to name check. In fact, actually 3 people I should really say that I would want to name check here tonight. 2 of them are my fellow councillors. One indication of how serious our administration is about cycling is the fact that this time we also appointed a cycling champion, a man that I work with very closely, and he's my fellow SNP councillor, David Key, who's over there in the corner. He's one of the coolest members of our SNP party because he rides a Brompton and brings it into the office on a regular basis. My other fellow councillor here is Chaz Booth from the Green Party, and he and I have worked together on quite a number of issues, and I think we'll certainly continue to do so because I think we both have the same attitude towards cycling and its very important role within the future of the city. The third person I want to mention is somebody who I might ask to help field any difficult technical questions that you might have for me later, and that's Phil Noble of our active travel team, who has both educated me in terms of the benefits of cycling and the role that it has to play in the city, but is a fount of knowledge on all things cycling and indeed active travel. One of the nicest things I've heard said about me since I came into the council, and believe me, you get quite a lot of nasty things said about you, usually in the comments pages on the Edinburgh Evening News. But one of the nicest things I heard was a report that one of my fellow councillors, not in my party, I hasten to add, had described me in a meeting as somebody who got it. And I think that's a really important attitude that we have to hold within the administration, that we get the role of cycling. We get the fact that we want to expand it. We get the fact that we want to have more people out there who are actually taking part in it and enjoying the benefits of it and changing the nature of our city as a result. Switching it from car-centric to people-friendly, which is how I view active travel. There have been quite a few matters that have crossed my desk since I came into this role 4 months ago. And I'll drop a few names in here. Tram extension, that took quite a lot of time and is an ongoing issue. Pickery Place and Silverknowes Road roundabout. I want to talk to you about this last one in a little bit of detail, because I want you to understand how I reacted to something that bubbled up through social media. couple of months ago, I was sitting at home late one night, I think it was a Wednesday, there's nothing else to do on a Wednesday night, looking at Twitter. And I suddenly realised I was getting notification after notification after notification. And the topic that was coming up was a fairly standard project for the Edinburgh City Council. And it was about essentially maintenance and road resurfacing around Silverknowes Road roundabout. But I basically had cyclists screaming at me via Twitter, saying that the plans to put a peripheral, I'm not sure the technical term, so Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, but to put a perimeter cycle lane around the outside of this roundabout was representative of a serious danger to cyclists, particularly inexperienced ones. On Thursday, I got into the office, pulled together the officials that were concerned, and I think by Friday we were reaching out to undertake further consultation. The work was due to start the following Monday. It had been a well-intentioned effort on the part of another part of the council to try and enhance cycling facilities, but we realised immediately that we had to look at it again. And with the help of a number of organisations, Spokes included, we were able to look at that project, revise it and put in place some measures which I believe will substantially enhance that particular roundabout and allay the fears that had emerged through that Twitter storm. I mention this and I describe it because I want you to understand that that's the degree of responsiveness and care that we need to take. Now, it doesn't mean that I read every comment. It doesn't mean that I'm going to do everything that everybody tells me to do on Twitter, particularly the rude comments. But it's an indication, I think, of how much the administration's out there listening, trying to learn, trying to understand, and then to implement. I think I'd like to move now on to what will be the second half, and I hope slightly smoother part of the presentation that we had. If you excuse me while I learn to use this. I might be looking for some advice from this. Okay. Edinburgh cycling. A lot of these facts and figures are based on the 2015 Bike Life survey. I am not going to steal Daisy's thunder because there's a new version of that being launched in a few days' time. So if you'll forgive me, a lot of these figures are coming from 2015, but they are indicative of where we stand as a city. So we're looking at 7.3% of journeys to work by bike, 50% increase in the total number of cycle trips from 2011 to 2015. We've increased the part of the transport budget which relates to this from 5% in 2012 to 13, from 5% in that year, rising until we reach 10% in 2017 and 18. The commitment to retain it at 10% is there. When we look then, thank you, I'm just checking that my technique's working. If we look then at the potential for increased cycling in Edinburgh, which is something I think everybody in this room wants to see happen, it's absolutely clear that this very comprehensive study throws up the fact that there's a substantial number of people in this city who either cycle or would like to. And I think we recognise from these figures that if we can convert the ones who would like to but currently don't, we're reaching figures that would take us towards a Copenhagen-style city. Having recently visited there, I'm particularly keen on that because I think it will bring an enormous set of benefits. These are some of the key statistics that we have. 16.5 million bike trips in Edinburgh every year, an 11% increase in trips by bike between 2013 and 2014. 32% of people ride a bike at least once a month or more. I won't go through all of them. You can see them and you can read them. But I would like to refer back to something that I mentioned earlier on. We're talking here about £12.5 million health benefit to the city in a single year. Can you imagine the benefit that that would have for council expenditure and individual people's lives if we could increase that rate of riding? Cycling growth and infrastructure. It's the old, if you build it, they will come. We're keenly aware of that link between the building of infrastructure and the increasing numbers of people who will actually use it and benefit from it. Clearly, these are ambitious targets that we have to get to 15% of journeys to work by 2020. Ambitious, but we're working on it. Can I look now at the key achievements in the last year, 2016 to 2017? The first one I'd like to look at is a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. Clearly, this is an ongoing project for the council. We're looking to put the last phase in place in January of next year. Despite what I sometimes get into my inbox, and despite what we read in that famed below-the-line set of comments in the evening news, I consider 20-mile-an-hour zone limit to be a rip-roaring success. And one of the reasons for that is the anecdotal evidence that we're getting coming forward from people who feel safer and more likely to actually get out onto our streets either through walking or cycling, those who feel safer to allow their children to cycle, those who feel like getting back on a bike for the first time in many years, reduced noise, if we're talking of setted streets, for example, and the general perception that life is quieter, safer, and a little bit better. Clearly, we've undertaken quite a lot of construction as well, but the main focus in 2016 has been on designing new schemes ready for future construction. But we've delivered some important improvements across the cycling network in the last year. One or two examples there, which I think are... one or two examples that I'd like to mention are the Innocent Railway lighting and some New Haven ramp, for example, at Lindsay Road. There are various other bits and pieces that I could mention, but I won't go into too much detail. I suspect all of you know them much better than I do, since you'll have ridden through some of them. The design work for 2017 has concentrated on the quiet routes network, and clearly the key focus here has been creating better links to and through the city centre, and upgrading existing routes so they're completed to the standards that we set out in the active travel plan and in response to feedback from users. We also have the award-winning School Streets, which is designed to reduce the amount of traffic on streets around primary schools at the beginning and the end of the school day. Clearly, one of the main aims of that is to make conditions much more attractive for children to either walk or cycle to school, and to make their parents feel that it's safe enough to let them do so. We also have been concentrating on marketing and behaviour change. So the On Foot by Bike scheme that you're probably all quite well, campaign rather I should say, that you're all probably well aware of. We've looked at various aspects of that, all designed clearly with the desire to get more people onto bikes or onto their own Shanksy's pony to get to various spots. We've also undertaken quite extensive travel planning and advice given to major businesses in Edinburgh, and that's clearly one area that we can grow and develop over the coming years. Talking of the coming years, what is coming in the next couple of years? Clearly the rollout of the final rollout of 20 miles per hour, as we mentioned, the development of school streets as well. There'll be additional schools added in 2018. We're looking at street design guidance, etc., being improved. There's quite a lot of reports coming through to the Transport and Environment Committee in the course of the next 2 or 3 meetings, which should make quite a substantial difference around issues of this nature. I mentioned earlier on that we will be looking at additional schools to be added to the School Streets programme. One of the most recent, and I think probably quite important and somewhat emotive topics that we've been dealing with in recent months has been the attempt to try and improve safety around tram tracks for cyclists. Although some of this work was actually started before the tragic fatality at the end of May, it clearly spurred us on and focused the mind quite extensively. Most of you, I think, will be quite familiar with the different stages that we're looking at for this project. The phase 1 is in already, and we're continuing to look through phase 2 and phase 3, which incorporate yet more awareness campaigns and indeed some further infrastructure changes. Construction in 2018 to 19 will concentrate on quiet routes again. I won't go into too much detail because I'm conscious I'm probably about to get the finger at the watch part, which I knew I could talk for hours about this. But let me move then quickly to the design work. There are two key focuses: major city centre projects and connecting up the quiet routes network. I want to also mention the city centre west-east link. We've made some moves on that. We've got a committee liaison officer has been appointed. Preliminary designs are in place. Further consultations being completed. TRO process is beginning, so it's on its way. There was mention of Sustrans earlier today. Earlier in the speeches, Committee Links Plus, we were very fortunate and quite frankly gobsmacked to win 2 of the projects. But clearly it brings both challenges and joy in the attempt to actually bring those to fruition, and that's something that we're working on at the moment. The 2 winning bids were the West Edinburgh Active Travel Network and Meadows to George Street. 3 further projects which are worth mentioning very briefly are Leith Walk, Piccadilly Place and Leith Street. What will be constructed in 2018 are Leith Walk up to MacDonald Road, the full segregation of cycle lanes. Leith Street to Carlton Road, again full segregation. There's further design working on between MacDonald Road and Piccadilly Place. George Street preliminary design is underway. Piccadilly Place further consultation is underway. The design 2018 to 19, the network connections, you can see here there's considerable amount of work. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm conscious you probably can't see the detail on this, but if you have any questions later, we can field them through Phil. He's my sacrificial lamb for the evening. So in terms then, briefly, of promotion and marketing in 2017 and 18, clearly we are looking very much forward to next week's launch of Bike Life 2017, which will give us substantial information and help to direct our future work. We're going to have further marketing, promotion and workplace travel planning in an attempt to get more people out of cars and onto bikes. The next 5 years, clearly you've listened to some of the visions and goals that we've got for this administration. There was, for example, recently a council agreed motion which is looking at city centre transformation in quite a big way. We're trying to look at the picture on the box rather than the individual jigsaw pieces. And that's a substantial piece of work that the council is undertaking. But within that, there'll be a traffic study and a commitment to pedestrian and cycle priority. There are other pieces of work that are ongoing, primarily in relation to the Scottish Government aims to have 4 cities with low emission zones. That's a lot of work that's going on at the moment in the council, and which we hope to bring to fruition quite quickly, and which I hope will improve conditions by removing some cars off the road and improving air quality in the city. You've heard a lot about the challenges facing councils from my fellow speakers, understandably so, but I would like to end on quite a positive note. Edinburgh City Council is ambitious, deeply ambitious. I'm certainly driving officials into areas that I think might be pushing them slightly out of their comfort zone, but we are determined to make a difference in the course of the next 4.5 years. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Leslie. While I move out of the way and invite Daisy to come up to the front, maybe a couple of quick announcements while you get your headset on and things like that. Paul is busy at the back with a membership stall, so if you aren't a member yet or would like to renew your membership, there's your opportunity to do so at the end of the meeting. Second thing to say is Pedal on Parliament is planning to have another Pedal on Parliament meeting at around Easter time, and they are meeting and looking for support with organising the event, and their meeting is on the 23rd of November at 6 o'clock till 7:30 at the bike station. So Pedal on Parliament organisers, bike station meeting on the 23rd of November from 6 till 7:30. And the last thing to say is that we are streaming this meeting live on Facebook, and we're also trying to record all the sound. So please, when we're doing the question and answer, don't talk until the microphone arrives at you. The second reason, of course, is that people with induction hearing loops can't really hear you, can't really hear anything unless the microphone is used. Yeah? So please be patient and we'll run around with a microphone. Okay, we have about an hour left for question and answers. So Daisy will be
Thank you.
chairing it. Thanks.
Thank you, Miss. Thank you, Spokes, for inviting me along today, and thank you so much to the panel for this really brilliant presentation, setting the context for the next hour or so. I was saying to my friend last night that I'm a bit, not daunted, but I had a big day today. It was a big day with my partners in Stirling. We had a Community Links Day, and obviously chairing quite a big session here. And she said to me, I don't know what you're worried about. You're going to be spending a whole day with people who want to make the world a better place. So you're going to have a fantastic day. And that's exactly what I've had so far, and I think what the next hour is going to be as well. So again, thank you, Spokes, for making that opportunity happen for me. It's been interesting to listen to the talks. There's a few themes I've picked up, and I'd very quickly like to mention them and then jump right into the Q&A. There's obviously the challenges that are shared across the Edinburgh and the Lothians. Financial challenges, I hear what you say about match funding as well. Despite the amazing announcement, the Programme for Government announcement, there's obviously issues that need to be looked at the local level. It's great to see the successes both in the City of Edinburgh and the Lothians, some specific examples of projects there. Brilliant to hear the panelists talking about the cross-portfolio working, especially the links with health and active travel. And it's brilliant to see the exciting plans, again, going forward. It's good to see some specific issues raised out there across the board. And to me, most importantly, what came through, as Councillor McKenna said, is that you get it. I think everybody will agree that up here, the panel are here to listen and to make sure that all our views that are said tonight will be taken on board. Just a few ground rules before we kick off, just because I'm a mum of a 7 and a 4-year-old, and I like my rules, so I'm sorry. But very quickly, it would be great to have questions. I know we're in Edinburgh, and it's very easy to get caught up in Edinburgh-focused questions, but it'd be brilliant as we've got panelists from across the regions to kind of keep that a little bit more balanced. And it would be great, because it's been such a positive context that's been set, to keep the conversations positive, and even if there are criticisms to be leveled, if we could keep them constructive, that would be absolutely brilliant. So that's all from me. Thank you for listening, and it'd be brilliant to kickstart. Who wants to go first? Oh, is there? Oh, sorry. Could I? Apologies. I'd like to invite Moira Nelson from SEStran onto the panel as well. Moira works for SEStran. She is. Moira, do you want to say a little bit more about yourself? Obviously, I can, but yeah, sure. It'd be best for you to.
Thank you. I'm the. Is this working? Okay. Hi. Is that working? I'm the Active Travel Officer at SEStran. And we work across 8 local authorities in the southeast of Scotland. We get some funding from Sustrans to work on active travel projects with the local authorities. And we are focused mainly on cross-boundary active travel, so joining up with the different local authorities. So that's sort of why I'm here today, to sort of put a focus on to, as well as the local plans, it's looking at it at a regional level as well.
Thanks, Moira. And I'd also like to invite Paul Ince. Is he here? As you know, Councillor Hampshire couldn't make it today from East Lothian, but Paul's here in his personal capacity, I believe. Used to work for East Lothian Council, and would be able to answer some questions. Paul, do you want to say a little bit more about yourself?
As Daisy said, I did used to work for East Lothian Council. I retired just over 4 years ago. One of my responsibilities was cycle-related activities. Worked over the years with staff from Sustrans, SEStran, and all the neighbouring local authorities, trying to improve cycle facilities for everybody. And certainly in my time at the council. I think the issues are very similar to what have already been mentioned tonight by the other panellists. Funding, land ownership, etc. But we managed to get some things done, and things are still happening in East Lothian. I'll answer what questions I can, but as I said, it's purely in a personal capacity. In no way am I representing East Lothian tonight.
And thank you very much again, Paul, for this last minute agreeing to come on the panel. Right, so first question. Do you want to go first? Be good to introduce yourself before you ask the question, maybe a little bit about where you're from.
Yeah, it's Dave Holiday, and one point to Leslie, but the rest is very much borders and rural areas, but it affects other people. Will one of the councils up here be the first council in Scotland to actually chuck out road safety and engage with road danger reduction? We've got two councils, City of London and Lambeth, are now turning the thing on its head. Not put the protective gear on, not defend people, let's remove the hazards in the first place. But I'll go on to the main question I've got. When I used to build and survey cycle paths for Sustrans back in the mid-1980s, and I used to go to the site on Cllr on the 7 o'clock bus from Stirling. You could put 4 bikes on the 62 and take it down to Glentress every hour. That's when Arthur Phillips had 3,000 people a year visiting Glentress to go cycling. You now have over 300,000 people a year going to Glentress, and you can't put your bike on the bus. And I'm aware that the company Borders Buses, Colin Craig, actually does operate buses that take bikes on board. And that's done because Hightrans specify on a contracted bus service that you'll carry bikes. It used to be part of the Scottish SMT conditions of carriage. Rural buses will carry bikes. And the big advantage is, I'll give an example, Hamilton to Straven. At night, if you want to get back to Straven, you've got to cycle a single carriageway, unlit, fast rural road. The drivers let you put your bike on the bus. And a lot of people who are not happy about cycling, if you throw in that as the Rescue Me feature, bikes in taxis, bikes on buses, it gets people places. And we're already doing it into Fife. A lot of people commute that way with the express coaches from Fife, because Stagecoach allow it.
So the question specifically is
well, how are we going to get people who don't fancy cycling? You know, they're not mile eaters.
Right.
And I've just seen the public bike hire survey. 25% of the public bike hire hires are going to catch a bus. 40% are going to catch a train. So this is the final mile, the first mile of your journey. And it also means for some of your rural services, you don't have the expense of getting the bus to the passenger every time, because you can get the passenger to the bus if you let them cycle.
I don't know if somebody wants to start off. It's about bikes and buses, and are there any plans in the future, or is there anything that you'd like to observe?
Yeah, I'll start it off by saying there was a piece of work done, if I recall, and Moira will remind me, by SEStran about looking at the possibility of having a trailer on the back of a bus. No, just here. There was a look at that, because in Mid-Lothian, it's mostly Lothian buses that go through as services. Borders buses do run through services on 2 routes, but it's mostly Lothian buses that cover off Mid-Lothian, and obviously Lothian buses aren't too keen on doing anything. It's something that we may take up. I'm not on the board, but I think your City of Edinburgh is on the board anyway, so it may be something that can be done. It's not something that the bus companies are very keen on, certainly down in the south of Scotland, but it's certainly something that could be looked at. Can't give any promises that we would actually get a solution to it, because at the end of the day, we're not the people that are running the buses, and I think probably we'd end up having to get some sort of legislation through before you could actually enact anything like that. But that's just a starter for looking at it.
Thank you. A couple of points in there. Yes, I am the Chair of Transport for Edinburgh, so I'm feeling very responsible as we sit here with Lothian Bus having been fingered as somebody who's not willing to take it on. And I promise faithfully that when I sit down next time with the Chair of Lothian Bus and the Chair of Edinburgh Tram to raise it, raise it as an issue. I cannot promise a solution immediately, but I will certainly raise it. And it's, it's clearly an issue, because when you're talking about bike tourism, for example, all of those other issues which bring enormous benefits to some smaller communities, as well as the entry point perhaps for them through Edinburgh. I can see the benefits of that, as well as the benefits it could bring to more local residents and people who are doing bike touring from a Scottish centre. I would hasten to add that I understand that Edinburgh trams already take buses. Sorry. That's possibly taking integration too far if I try to get a bus onto a tram, but they already take bikes on trams. I think it's a maximum of 2, but with the discretion of the conductor. I understand clearly the issue of integration between modes of transport, which is really what you're referring to here. And it is an issue, an ongoing issue, and presumably an evolving one if we push it. Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear.
Yeah. Would you want to go first? And then Charles.
Thank you. I was in West Lothian yesterday, cycling along the A89, and I was a wee bit surprised to hear from Jim, who I think said that the cycle path along the A89 was complete from Newbridge to Bath Gate. And I can tell him it's either well disguised or not quite complete. So I would invite Jim to have a wee go at cycling along it and see what he thinks.
Thank you. Where were you unable to pick it up?
Well, Newbridge to the outskirts of Bathgate, where there's a roundabout, you're on the north side of the road, and there is absolutely no easy way of crossing that roundabout. And from what I could tell, the cycle path continues, but there's no way of crossing. And then further along, it just stops. And then a bit further along, it goes to the south side of the road. So I would invite you to go along and have a wee go at it.
I'll take your point on board. There are two things there. Clearly the route is there, but you've got concerns about how you get across some of the key junctions and the key roads. That's one of the difficulties we have at the moment in continuing to deliver the rest of it. This has developed over a long time. And therefore we're trying with the newer sections to deal with that type of issue. I'll hold my hand up. I think things could be better signed, and it's one of the areas that we're using our active travel funding from Smarter Choices, Smarter Places to deliver that. So I will be going to check and see what it is. I'm still fairly confident you can get from A to B, as I said, but there may be issues in terms of how you manage that journey and how you cross some of the roads. And I'm not trying to suggest by my original comment that there weren't bits like that, and we take that on board and we look to develop that. We're keen to try and make the connection through these sections. Clearly there's potential to improve access at these locations. As it was mentioned earlier, retrofitting in these locations is difficult because you're dealing with infrastructure that's already there. You've got main roads like the 801. These are things that are difficult to deal with and deliver, but I appreciate you raising it with you, and thank you for that. I will check that out, and definitely the sign-in part is pretty key. Still fairly sure you can do it, but I know you have to cross some difficult roads.
Thanks, Jim. Councillor Booth, and you had a question, then come back to you. Councillor Booth, do you want to go first?
Thanks very much. Chas Booth, Green Councillor for Leith and Green Transport Spokesperson on Edinburgh Council. And I should probably declare an interest before asking this question. I'm also a SEStran board member. But my question, since we have most of the Lothians councils represented here and SEStran, what are the opportunities over the next sort of 5 years or so for strategic cycling and walking links being constructed across council boundaries? And in particular, what are the barriers to those strategic links coming forward? I know, for example, SEStran's recently commissioned a study into, I think, the Portobello to Musselburgh link. So I suppose, what are the chances of that coming forward? Is it a barrier to coming forward with strategic links that the regional transport partnerships no longer have the funds to invest in capital infrastructure? And is that something that the panellists believe the Scottish Government should re-examine?
Thanks, Chaz. As a former chair of SEStran, which and when it was actually set up in 2005, and I was on the voluntary partnership prior to that, but as a former chair from 2005, there was no doubt about it that when we had direct funding into the regional model, you were able to actually deliver fairly amongst the authorities a lot of projects where they were actually inter-council. And I mean, I'll use one example that where there is going to be a challenge, and I mentioned it, I think, earlier on, where you hit the city bypass, you've got Midlothian on one side and Edinburgh on the other side, and it's how you get through, I'll call it the dumbbell, but the two roundabouts at Straighton, and it's quite a nightmare. Now, we could work together on that, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to funding. And whether the two authorities could find the funding or not, I'm not so sure they can. And I'll make the point that was made earlier on, and Daisy, you're going to be sick and tired of hearing this, but whereas when SEStran come along and say we're quite prepared to support a project, it's subject to 50% match funding. And sometimes as a council, given the priorities we have and what we can do and what we can carry out, it's not always the ability to do that. It's not because we don't want to do certain projects, sometimes it's because we can't find that match funding, and the rules were changed. I think it was this year, where it was later on in the year. So of course part of the council's transportation budget was mostly earmarked for projects, and along came this get into the SEStran. I can't remember what the name of the fund was at this juncture, but it was get into there and look for that. Now, the thing was going to be, I think, decided about September time. Now, given that you have your budget set up from April in the year, by the time you get to September, an awful lot of your budget is actually already fully allocated. So it's something that they would ask. And the second part of Chaz's question is it time for central government or the Scottish Government to review what I would say was a mistake in taking the strategic funding away? I simply do, and I've raised it many times with transport ministers, but there's no appetite to do that, because, of course, the argument is that it's gone into the general grant funding for local authorities and divided amongst 32 local authorities, and therefore it goes into the general fund, and if you don't get it for transport, TUFF, and that's really, and that's the sum and substance of it. I'm not going to beat about the bush. You get it straight at what it's like. It's very frustrating for SEStran, because they can carry out as many studies as they want, but they ain't going to be able to deliver at the other end of that, and it's a shame. And whether it be one project or a number of projects, it's actually going to be a real difficulty for all of us.
Do you want to pick that up, Moira, and then maybe the other panelists?
Just to carry on from Russell's point there about, yeah, we can fund studies, but there's also importance in those studies as well, because if we are able to fund them and get them to the detailed design stage when the funding is available, for example, from SUSTRAN's community links, those projects are ready, they're already designed, so they're at that stage where they can then be implemented. So I think there is, even though, yeah, we don't have funding anymore, there is still some importance in the small amount of funding that we do have. And just going back to Councillor Booth's point about, you know, how do we prioritise cross-boundary routes? I think, you know, it's how do we make that happen? It's bringing two councils together potentially, and you know, we're sorry, there's such a big focus on local development and cycling that, you know, these routes that are functional and could make the difference of getting someone onto a bike, they're not being prioritised.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we put the focus onto that?
Would anyone else like to address that on the panel?
Just going back a few years, when I was working in East Lothian, the cross-border routes that were put in East Lothian were really effectively done by Sustrans. You've got National Cycle Route 1 that comes up through Mid-Lothian, crosses into East Lothian, and then into Edinburgh, and then on its merry way. That was pretty much done together by Sustrans with, in conjunction with the council. Similarly with the North Sea Cycle Route, that comes up from the borders through East Lothian and then along into Edinburgh. And again, that was done by it was effectively a signing exercise on existing routes. But I think when if you haven't got a body that crosses borders, such as the regional partnerships or an organisation such as that, then it's very difficult for individual authorities. If one authority wins funding for a scheme up to the border and the neighbouring council doesn't, I mean, we've got the situation where we put cycle lanes in East Lothian on Edinburgh Road down in Musselburgh, and bump, they stop at the Edinburgh boundary because, you know, there was no sort of joint working at the time. Until you address that sort of issue, or the regional partnerships get substantive funding to implement schemes, then I think that issue will carry on. Plus, you've got the physical issues such as the bypass, and which will always cause problems.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
I would put in a mention of the fact that one of the reasons why we have this trickle-down problem with council funding sits at the heart of Westminster austerity policies. But let's leave the politics slightly to one side for that matter. I mean, this is not in direct response to Chaz's question, because we're always talking about something quite specific in terms of the sort of cross-border routes. But let's not forget the fact that the Scottish Government has just announced a doubling of its funds from 40 million to 80 million for active travel per year for the rest of their administration. That is quite a substantial leap. So although we may not be seeing the impact of it right now, well, we did partly, I think, through the Community Plus Links projects, but we may not be able to see that, but we will see a head of steam built up across the next few years around that, and I hope that that would help to address some of the issues that Chaz has just highlighted. In addition to which, too, there is a lot of talk in both Scottish Government and certainly in my council, and I suspect in every other, which is really about spend to save. It's about prevention. I mentioned it earlier on when I was speaking about health benefits, etc. So it's no longer about silo spending. It's no longer about specifics. It's about looking at the outcomes and where best to spend money across the functions in council. And that requires creativity, and it requires a willingness to work with each other, whether it's cross-border councils or whether or not it's within the functions of your own particular council. So I would say that there are still some positive green shoots in there, despite what we're talking about, in terms of overall cuts to budget. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you.
I'll just very briefly make a comment. I suspect that the biggest sort of cross-boundary issue for West Lothian is the A71 corridor. The difficulty trying to deliver a scheme like that is different priorities in terms of the different authorities and how you match those up. It's quite important for us to get a link into there, but clearly there's a bigger demand within the centre of Edinburgh in terms of sort of making that provision. So the role of a regional partnership and trying to help deliver these types of cross-boundary things is, in my opinion, as an officer, really quite important, and how that is done and managed, I think, needs to be taken forward. But whilst we have done work in the past on looking in that corridor, but it's finances and priorities, because you've got two different authorities who, with the best will in the world, are looking to do the most appropriate projects that they can, and sometimes that means that the cross-border schemes don't match up, but they are vitally important, and I think you need that regional aspect to deliver them.
Thank you. Could we take maybe 3 questions and then get the panel to pick up 1 or 2 of those? Sorry, I know you've had your hands for a bit. There was a lady there who had her hand up as well, and gentleman green up there. So, Ewan, do you want to go first?
Hello, Ewan Jeffrey from Spokes. Councillor Booth stole my question.
You can sit down there.
I'll sit down. So I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a non-Edinburgh question, because I think everyone on the panel gets it. They don't necessarily have the money to get it, but they get it. So as a question for the non-Edinburgh councils, one of the dangers or difficulties of cycling in rural roads is the speed of traffic on B roads. It's a failure of your planning if you end up on an A road. So you're trying to be on B roads and C roads. So anything that can be done to address the speed of traffic on B roads, and also to consider emulating what Clackmannanshire has done exceptionally successfully, of creating a network of minor roads which are specifically signed as being walking and cycling friendly. And I don't think these exist in East and West, but I would commend you to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just take those 2 questions again? That lady.
Hello, my name's Laura Burnett. I live in Midlothian and I work in Edinburgh, so I'm very aware of both the difficulty and danger of crossing the city bypass on a daily basis by bike, but that's been covered. The point I wanted to ask specifically to Councillor Imrie was about what's the grand plan for Midlothian for cycle infrastructure. You've lamented on the lack of strategic funds that are available to the council, but if there were there, what are the big plans? What's the big aspiration? What can I look forward to? What can my son look forward to if money was no object over the next 25 to 40 years in our county?
Excellent. And 1 more question there at the back, and then we can get the panel.
Hi, my name is David French. I'm going to push my luck and ask 2, one of which is from someone who's watching on the Facebook feed. She wants to ask Councillor McInnes what's happened to the Meadows Canal link. And my own question was for Councillor Imrie as well. You talked about the A701 and how it could be a primary route for public transport and active travel. What specific things are you hoping to do there to keep cars off it?
Brilliant, thank you. So there's a few questions there. There was one about rural roads, B roads, and the speed of traffic. Specific questions about grand plans for what's A701, and then Councillor McInnes, Meadows to the canal project. So who wants to go first? Yeah. That's fine.
I'll kick off since the quiet roads part is the key question in relation to West Lothian. I mentioned in the presentation there, we've taken forward a consultation on quiet roads on the similar lines to what's happened in Clackmannanshire, and we are proposing a pilot for that. It brings with it challenges. The whole initiative, I understand in Clackmannanshire, and what we are proposing is quiet roads is about signing locations where the speeds are already generally low. It's not about introducing lots of measures to slow the traffic down on these routes. It's about encouraging people to use roads that are already safer for them, and to ensure that the drivers are fully aware that they will meet pedestrians and other active users. So we are trying to develop that. We've been out, we've got good support from the public, and we're taking forward a scheme. But that brings challenges because there's still difficult connections to make even within those links, which is why we haven't rushed to get one forward. So you're right, it is a speed issue, but in general there's the work on areas where speeds are already low, and you're just helping to reinforce that message and give everybody a bit more security about the travel on a route where they'll be expected to meet other people. So we are trying to take that forward, but at the moment we're sort of moving forward with a pilot project.
It's a good point about examples of clocks, potentially.
Yeah.
Just following on from this issue of rural roads, about 10 years ago East Lothian produced a free cycle leaflet, just an A3. Effectively it was a cut down version of the spokes map, but we took the approach of identifying routes that we thought were unsuitable for cyclists. They're all marked in red, and the remainder of the network, basically the minor roads, are all in green. That was our way of trying to sort of encourage cyclists to use the more suitable routes. That, unfortunately, that map is now, I think, pretty much. Well, it was never reprinted. I did see there's one copy on the table at the back there, so it might be the last one in existence. But as I say, there was just one approach we took to try and encourage people to use appropriate roads.
Councillor Emery, would you like to pick up on the...
Yeah, certainly. On the first question, no, we don't have anything in Midlothian on our B roads in terms of what you're suggesting. It's something I've taken a note of and I'll take back, and we can ask the officers, and probably I'll be told that we do have certain aspects and I've got it wrong, but I can't think off the top of my head in Midlothian what we've got at this moment in time, but I'll certainly can get back, and I can via spokes with the information about Midlothian if there's anything at all, but certainly something I'll take back. In terms of what's the grand plan for Midlothian, and just the first thing I'll say is that we're producing an active travel strategy which will be going out to consultation. So it's not about us doing it and then that's going to be implemented. It's going to go out for consultation probably the first quarter of 2018, and that will form part of the Green Network supplementary guidance. And I think when I opened up to explaining to people there's going to be probably circa 20,000 houses going to be coming to Midlothian, and that there's an opportunity to do something through the local plan. The supplementary planning guidance is actually being worked on at this moment in time. The active travel strategy will form part of that, but nevertheless there's going to be certain terms and conditions within that will actually be part of the greening agenda. We're also going to be working alongside East Lothian Council, the City of Edinburgh Council, for the joined up part, because clearly there are a number of areas where we need to work together, and there's no agenda saying, well, one won't work with the other. It's all about looking for a solution. So I can assure you that will be as part of the Green Network will actually be there as well. So that's that aspect. As far as the A701 question was concerned, how are we going to go about making it a public transport corridor? I think, again, I said at the outset, that's our intention. What we need is the objective views coming into the council so that we can then start to plan out what will be the best. Now, there might be some compromises along the way. I'm not going to say that everything it's asked for will be there, but certainly by working together, that corridor can actually bring about, a first public transport corridor, certainly in Midlothian. And for me, that's going to be, it's going to be great to see. First of all, it's in Moan Ward, so I'm actually very prejudiced about that. But secondly, it's a very, very important corridor. And if we can encourage more and more people onto public transport, whether it be walking, I know that you might not think that's public transport, forms part of the public transport agenda, walking, cycling, or getting a bus, to my mind, is going to be a real advantage to right along that corridor. So I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, But what we're prepared to do is listen to the folks that would actually go and use that route and try and plan it as best as we possibly can. So it's an assurance. As I've said it once, and I'll say it again, we're open to listen to comments, and we will certainly be looking at developing something that people can comment on as well.
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry.
I think you're asking me specifically about the Meadows to Canal route. It's a mix of improvements to quiet streets. It's about cycling provision on a one-way street. It's about two-way segregation, at one point one-way segregation and creation of a pedestrian zone. Now this is a point at which I'm going to look to Phil to ask whether or not it's actually in design stage.
Martin's got one.
So I think the question is what's happened to it. So unfortunately this scheme, what has been delayed during its design stage, and that was because we gave a lot of priority over the last 2 years to the city centre east-west link, and during that period the council went through a significant change in staff numbers, which was called transformation. But during that process, our team the teams ended up at roughly the same size, but we did lose members of staff, and we were significantly down in staff during that period. We gave high priority to the city centre west-east link. That project went on hold. We're just at this, literally in the last few weeks, in the process of trying to get some consultants back on board to start the design process back going again. So hopefully you'll actually see something happening on this project in the not too distant future.
And now that I know about it, it's going in my diary to ask Phil about it in a few weeks' time.
Mace, question. Ooh, lots of hands. And one from you and one from yourself.
I have a question from... Wait a minute. Claire C. through Facebook, asking Twitter, yeah. What plans do people have for implementing or strategies for cycling and equalities? So getting the ethnic minorities, women and other disadvantaged communities to cycle.
Great question, one close to my heart, as you can imagine. Okay. And yourself, sorry.
Thank you for your presentations. When earmarking money for new routes, what percentage of that budget is earmarked for community engagement and consultation? And how do you think this consultation could be improved going forward, if possible?
Brilliant, thank you. And there was one from the gentleman there.
Robert Timpson, I'm a Mid Lothian resident. We had a question there about rural B roads. I'm also interested in rural A roads, many of which in Mid Lothian are a nightmare, and I don't think there's an immediate solution to that. But one simple thing that could be done is to allow cycling by default on the pavements and footways that follow the A68 and the A7, probably several other of the A roads as well. These are just the two I'm most familiar with. And with very little bit of upgrading to those footpaths, they could become really quite attractive cycle routes, and I wonder if that's a possibility generally on A roads and specifically on these two roads.
Thank you. So, sorry, 3 questions. There's one. Oh, no, sorry. There's 3 questions. There's one about diversity in cycling, community engagement and consultation, and then rural A roads. Does the panel want to pick up anyone specifically first, or Councillor McInnes, would you like to go on diversity? Yes.
You heard me mention earlier on my barriers to cycling, and I'm very aware of the fact that there are others who feel the same way. I think it's very necessary to look at cycling beyond the world of Cllr and to encourage as many people as widely as possible to get involved in it. Clearly, there are some aspects to it that we can start to push a little bit on. I'm thinking, for example, when we're discussing workplace travel strategies, the encouragement of showers, for example, secure bike parking, all of those kinds of measures will make a substantial difference to getting people who might not sit in the traditional cyclist groups involved. But quite clearly there's a whole issue about safety. If people are nervous, maybe not used to it, they don't have friends who cycle, there are all sorts of reasons why people will not be readily thinking to put themselves onto a bike and start to commute on it. I can't tell you anything specific because I think it varies from place to place, whether we're talking about workplace travel planning, whether or not we're talking about facilities in council offices, all of those kinds of things. But I think it's something that it's fair to say that our active travel team keep quite closely monitoring in terms of their work. It's an area that I haven't had a chance to look at very specifically, but it is one that I'm very conscious of.
Thank you. Would anyone like to pick up on community engagement specifically, or the rural A routes, Councillor Emery?
I don't have an answer to the percentage, but I mean, anything that we put out in terms of what we're looking to do by way of projects, etc., we're quite more than happy to go out there and take in community engagement, because I'll be honest about it, whether you be an elected member or an officer, you don't always get it right. You might think you know what you're doing, and somebody else comes along and says, oh, well, you forgot to do X, Y, or Z, and you've spent maybe a lot of money on something that actually doesn't actually alleviate or address the problems that you have. So as far as community engagement, there's no price put on that. It's not a matter of saying, oh, we're not going to do it because it's going to cost money. We will be doing it, and it's part of our equality strategy that we do it now anyway, because obviously we do equalities impact assessments on everything nowadays, including the whole equalities agenda, as Leslie has alluded to, about what we do as a council to encourage people to cycle and indeed walk by having facilities in the council, but also when we go out to other employers and we try to engage with them, we also, you're mentioning the equality agenda there, so we do have engagement. It's part of the agenda now that we do. It's all about participation, and certainly we do that. Picking up on the A68 and the A701, can I just differentiate that because it's got an A in front of it, it's not necessarily a road that's got the responsibility of the local authority. And I can think of the A702, which is on the west side of Midlothian, and the A68, which is on the east side of Midlothian, are all trunk roads and are designated by Transport Scotland. Likewise, the A720 bypass, similar thing. Transport Scotland have their role and responsibility for that. As far as the A701 is concerned, we actually do have opportunities to make improvements, and I alluded to what will be in the future opportunities to do, but certainly on other A roads, yes, by all means, we're quite prepared to look at any improvements. And the officer across there is getting frantic because I'm probably saying the wrong thing. However, it's said now, it's out there in the big wide world, Dave, so I can't take it back. But perhaps the officer may want to just add.
Do you want to have a quick addition, then we can take one more question because we got.
Hi, it's Dave Kenny from Midlothian Council. I'm the cycling officer. Just to expand upon what Russell was saying and the gentleman's question about the A68 and also the A7. Midlothian Council is currently looking at using some of the rural footpaths at the moment, as the gentleman mentioned, as part of our core path assessment for, I don't know whether that's next year, in making some of these rural paths, core paths, which means that they can be used by both cyclists and pedestrians. But we're going to do that on a trial basis, obviously, because we don't want to sort of have a wholesale change of culture. But certainly we're going to choose, certainly the ones that I'm thinking of are the ones up at Gore Bridge, North Middleton, connecting North Middleton as well. As Russell said, the A68, we've been on to the Transport Scotland and AME
especially because of the route possibly up to Pathhead, which again is a difficult route. And again, we were asking the question about whether some of the footpaths along the A68 could be used by cyclists as well. So we'll keep badgering on at Transport Scotland and Amy for that one, for a change as well. Because I know that there was a cyclist killed on the A68 just along from Pathhead. So.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor McInnes, you wanted to quickly pick up on the community engagement, and then we have time for one more question.
Yes, I just wanted to pick up directly on your question. As Councillor Emery said, we don't have a set percentage in each project that we put towards community engagement, but what we do have is a very strong commitment. And I think an example of that, well, two examples really. I was speaking this morning to some colleagues of mine, talking about George Street and possible plans for that. And already we're looking to exactly how we can undertake extensive and deep consultation across both stakeholder groups and individual residents and people who are impacted by that. So it's an example of one of the sort of pre-planning parts of community engagement and stakeholder engagement. But I can also give you another example, which is a bit of a retrofit of community engagement. One or two of you in the room will understand when I mention the term Piccadilly Place. It's not a happy story at this point, but what is happy about it is that when we realised that there was real concern out in the community, concern I hasten to add coming from more than just cycling groups or residents who cycle, but right across the piece about a lack of understanding of what was happening at that junction. I delayed the report that came to committee in order to engage in further consultation. We're having some sessions of that will begin the week commencing the 20th, and in that we'll have both stakeholder engagement and very wide public engagement in that. That's something that we did not anticipate at the start of that process, but which we were happy to engage in because it was the right thing to do, and it will hopefully produce a much more informed discussion between those who currently have concerns, those who are looking to use the junction, and the council. So we're hoping very much that it'll be a two-way consultation on that particular one. We'll learn from the people who come to that consultation, and we hope also to be able to present a more comprehensive picture of why we've reached where we are and what room for manoeuvre we have in terms of accommodating further issues that may bubble up through that consultation process. But it does give you an example that we're willing to engage both before properly planned stuff and a remedial consultation if we have to. Okay.
Thank you. One more question. Of course, sorry.
Thank you. And can I echo the comments that have been made? We don't have a particular percentage budget for consultation. I think it's about trying to get it right and getting the right people engaged, and the opportunity to use social media now to enable that actually gives a better opportunity for positive feedback to come to consultations as well. Quite often your initial consultation with people is negative, and the support that's there for it doesn't come from the community. And I think it's a much better opportunity now, and it's quite a cost-effective way of doing it as well. So that's all.
Absolutely. Thank you. There's time for just one more question, I suppose, what I'm being told. So if we could get one that's about cross-boundary, that'd be brilliant. Oh, sorry. Right, go ahead. Thank you.
Quickie, where are we at with the process of starting the bike share scheme in Edinburgh, and why is it so difficult to find out anything about it?
Good question.
Guess this one's for me, huh? Transport for Edinburgh is the organisation that's taking it forward. We're taking it very cautiously, and for a number of reasons. We are looking at some of the schemes that have been put in place elsewhere, notably bike and drop schemes, for example, which are not as simple or as welcome in some communities as you would imagine. We are being very cautious about it, but we're moving quickly on it, but we're trying to find absolutely the right scheme for Edinburgh. We have some special sets of circumstances that we have to adhere to. We are a World Heritage Site. So we have to take that into account. But we've already had extensive discussions with cycle hire groups of various types, and we're now going through the procurement process. I won't go into the boring details, but some of that is commercially confidential at this point. But I hope that we'll be moving quite quickly, and we're very much hoping, if all goes well, and I will put that caveat in, but if all goes well, that we'll see something launched in the springtime.
Excellent, thank you. I'm really sorry, we have to stop the questions here. You can see we could have gone on for another hour or two, the number of questions that were out there. If we could, the panel could just have a quick summing up, maybe a minute or so, and then I could sum up and we could start to discuss.
Okay. I was too busy answering questions to think about what I was going to say to sum up. Just suffice to say that I found the questioning and the contributions of my fellow panellists to be most interesting. I've learnt quite a lot from this evening, and I suppose that really is an indication of how we're approaching the whole question of active travel within our particular council. We want to carry on hearing from all aspects. I'm very conscious that I wasn't able to answer particularly well the question on equalities. So it highlighted for me an area that I want to go into much further. So basically keep it coming, please. We want the comments, nice ones, whether it's social media, whether it's inboxes, however we want to hear about it, whether it's through Spokes. And on the last point, I'd just like to say thank you to the partnership that as a council we've had with Spokes. I've found in my short time in the role it's been incredibly useful, whether it's information that's come through or reaction that's come through via my council official colleagues, or any direct contact I've had. I'm well aware of the influence that this organisation has had on Edinburgh, and I value it, and I look forward to it continuing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate your questions, and particularly the ones that put me on the spot in terms of going and checking things in West Lothian. It's always helpful to get that sort of direct input. I was at a national transport conference earlier in the week, and one of the key things that was mentioned was, in the broadest sense, transport as an enabler. And in these difficult times of financial constraint for local authorities, I think it's really important for organisations like Spokes and the community to get the messages across through the consultations as to how important these transport infrastructure issues are, and creating active travel, because without that, the difficulties of authorities are faced with difficult choices, and a lot of them will go towards potentially what are our statutory duties. Some of these things aren't statutory, so the best way to help influence the decision making and the difficult choices that are there for budgets is to get engaged and to communicate to your authorities and your local members what the issues are and how important they are to you.
Yeah, just in a way to echo what's already been said, but to add, probably, I hope you realise that the four authorities can and will work together. We're on the same page, we're on the same agenda. It might be that we get there at different speeds. That depends, I suppose, Leslie's electric bike versus those that have to pedal. But in all seriousness, we are trying to change the way society is. It's not easy when you've got constraints, but you do what you can, and you do it when you can. And that's something that I think hopefully you in the audience has got, because certainly I got it from here, that we are prepared to work together, we are prepared to find solutions when it's cross-boundary, and try and get things done that will make that difference for people that do want to be involved in active travel. So if there's anything at all, that's certainly something that I've got tonight, and I'm reassured that we can actually make that difference. That step change can be made, and hopefully we'll make it sooner rather than later. So thanks again.
Just to say that, as I said earlier, I'm not representing the council, but if you do have any comments, feedback, suggestions for East Lothian, if you live in East Lothian, obviously contact your local councillor, or Councillor Norman Hampshire, the transport convener. And finally, the cycle officer for East Lothian is a guy called Ian Reid, who you'll find on the council website. They will, I'm sure, deal with any issues that you might have.
Thank you very much. Can you thank the panel for it? And from me, very quick, 2 takeaways I've had. It's been fascinating. I think the conversation has been wide-ranging from equalities, community engagement, policy, strategy, to really specific questions about what really makes a difference in your everyday life. 2 takeaways. I love the phrase about focusing on the picture on the box rather than the individual jigsaw pieces, and I think that is something that collectively all of us have a part to play in doing that. So thank you very much to the panel and to Spokes for this evening, and I hope you all have a good evening.
It's for me to close the meeting and to thank everybody who's contributed, the meeting organizers, like Martin, the stalls people, the coffee people, the techies, the venue people, etc. But to thank you for coming and for showing your support, to giving up your evening, and to follow up some of the things that have been suggested. Also to say that all the links to the outputs from this meeting will be on linked from our website, so you can look them up there for later reference. And also from the middle of next week, we'll have a page created about our 40th with a link to the exhibit and the 3 videos as well. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for giving up your evenings and being very generous towards the whole cause of everything. I'm thinking maybe we should be buying them electric bikes as well. Thank you very much. And see you at the next meeting.